Wednesday, the 26th of August 2026. 18 hours after the world learned that Dolly Parton was gone. A woman who has lived her entire adult life in the lens sits down and writes something that does not behave like the tributes flooding every feed. There is a formula for these moments. A photograph. A story the public has never heard. A sentence about legacy. A soft close. What Miley Cyrus posted that morning does none of those things. It reads instead like a door being shut from the inside, gently, without apology, and with complete certainty that the people who mattered would understand. She opens by saying the loss of her Aunt Dolly is beyond what feels right to share. The most sacred moments, she writes, stay private. Behind the stage. Beneath the glamour. Between their hearts. 3 short phrases that refuse the very thing the world is asking for. And that refusal is the most revealing public act anyone performed that week. Not because of what it hides, but because of who taught her how to hide it. This is not a story about a famous godmother and her famous goddaughter. It is a story about a promise made in a Nashville room in the early 1990s, before the child even existed, and about the 33 years that followed when that promise was kept in ways no contract could have required. It is about a woman who never had children of her own yet spent a lifetime making other people's children feel chosen. It is about the quiet transfer of a particular kind of strength, the kind that knows exactly what belongs to the public and what does not. We will move through 4 movements. The origin of the promise. The years the public only ever saw the edges of. The song recorded 7 months before the end that no one, at the time, could have heard as farewell. And the tribute itself, read in full and in order, because the shape of the silence is the entire point. If Dolly Parton's voice ever drifted through your kitchen on a weekday morning, or if you once watched a 14-year-old girl in a blonde wig learn how to stand in the same light as a woman who had already stood there for 40 years, stay with us. The story that follows is not the one the headlines are writing. It is quieter. And it lasts longer. It begins with 2 country singers who already knew each other the way people in that world know each other. Billy Ray Cyrus was on the edge of the explosion that would make him a household name. Dolly Parton had already been famous for a quarter of a century. He told her he and his wife were expecting a girl. He did not ask. He told her she had to be the godmother. She said she would be honored. That was the whole conversation. No ceremony. No paperwork that bound anyone to anything. Just a sentence spoken in a room in Nashville and then lived out for the next 3 decades in full view of anyone who cared to look carefully enough. Most arrangements like that remain ceremonial. A name on a certificate. A photograph at a christening. Then everyone returns to their own lives. This one did not. The evidence is 33 years long in public, yet the most important parts of it were never performed for cameras. Dolly Parton never had children. She said for decades that God had given her everyone else's instead. She proved it with her younger siblings, with the nieces and nephews who called her Aunt Granny, with the imagination library that has now sent hundreds of millions of books to children who will never know her face. And in 1992 she said yes to one more child she had not met and could not have predicted would become one of the most photographed people of her generation. That is where the story starts. Not with fame. With a quiet yes spoken before the child was even born. The years that followed were never loud. They did not need to be. Dolly Parton simply kept showing up in the ways that mattered and stayed away from the ones that did not. When Miley Cyrus was still a child, the relationship lived mostly out of public view. There were visits, phone calls, and small kindnesses that never made the trades. The world saw only the edges. What it did not see was the steady presence of a woman who had already decided this particular child was hers to look after. By 2006 the arrangement stepped into the light. Hannah Montana premiered, and a 13-year-old girl suddenly carried the weight of a double life on national television. The premise itself was almost too neat. An ordinary teenager by day, a global pop star in a wig by night. Dolly Parton took a recurring role as Aunt Dolly. She was 60 years old, already one of the most decorated artists in country music, the owner of a theme park that sustained an entire region, and the founder of a literacy program reaching children across continents. She had nothing left to prove and everything to protect. Yet she returned to that Disney set again and again across 4 seasons. Not for a single publicity appearance. For a sustained presence. She played a version of the role she was already living. The commercial logic of such a guest spot usually runs in one direction. The established star borrows the younger audience. Dolly Parton reversed it. She lent her own audience to the girl. Miley would later say, without drama or calculation, that Dolly opened doors she could not have opened alone. People who had followed Dolly for decades suddenly paid attention to the teenager because the older woman stood beside her without hesitation. That quiet transfer of trust is rarer than any chart position. What the cameras captured was only part of the exchange. Both women understood spectacle as armor. Dolly had spent decades perfecting the surface. The wigs, the rhinestones, the self-deprecating jokes about her own figure. All of it functioned as both performance and boundary. She appeared to hand that same understanding to a girl who would need it more than most. The public saw the shared songs, the award show moments, and the easy laughter. What it did not see was the private instruction in how to remain whole while the world watched. Song by song the relationship continued to move in both directions. Dolly appeared on Miley's record. Miley stood beside Dolly on some of the most visible stages in the industry. Neither ever framed these moments as favors. They simply happened, the way certain things happen between people who have decided the bond is permanent. By the time Dolly recorded a serious, unadorned version of Miley's Wrecking Ball at 77, the pattern was clear. Respect traveled both ways. No hierarchy. No debt. Through it all, Dolly kept one part of her life almost completely sealed. Her marriage to Carl Dean lasted 58 years and remained largely invisible. He gave almost no interviews. He rarely appeared at awards. He watched her perform only once. She gave the public everything except the thing that mattered most. That discipline, more than any song, is what she passed forward. The pattern held through the next decade and beyond. Whenever the two women appeared together, the public saw affection and ease. What remained invisible was the quieter continuity. Phone calls that never became content. Advice that never became anecdotes. A steadying presence that asked for nothing in return. By the time Miley Cyrus stood on the stage of Saturday Night Live in May of 2021 and opened the show with Light of a Clear Blue Morning, the song already carried more weight than most of the audience could have known. She dedicated it to her mother and to Dolly. A 50-year-old song about walking out of darkness, sung by a woman who had spent 15 years in the brightest possible light, offered without explanation to the two people who had raised her. 7 months before Dolly Parton died, she returned to that same song. On the 16th of January 2026, 9 days before her 80th birthday, she released a new recording of Light of a Clear Blue Morning. She invited 4 women to sing it with her. Reba McEntire, Queen Latifah, Lainey Wilson, and Miley Cyrus. The proceeds went to pediatric cancer research at a children's hospital 8 miles from her home in Nashville. At the time it looked like what it was, a birthday gesture from a woman who had spent a lifetime turning personal milestones into help for other people's children. No one reading the announcement had any reason to hear it as farewell. She had written the song in 1976 while leaving the professional arrangement that had made her famous. Porter Wagoner had given her a national platform and then resisted letting her go. She answered with 2 songs. One was I Will Always Love You. The other was this one. She later called it her Song of Deliverance. A woman of 30 writing herself a map out of a cage and into open air. 50 years later she gathered 3 generations of women and sang it again. The oldest voice and the youngest belonged to the girl she had been given before that girl was born. The recording stands now in a different light simply because of the calendar. 2 of the 5 women who sang on it wrote public goodbyes within a day of each other the following August. One was Reba McEntire. The other was Miley. Yet the session itself was never intended as a final statement. To read it that way is to impose a story that was not present on the day it was made. Dolly Parton was still working, still joking, still showing up. The weight we feel now comes only from the order of events, not from any hidden code placed inside the music. When the news came on the 25th of August that she had died at home after a brief battle with cancer, the world did what it always does. It reached for the most visible people connected to her and waited for them to open their lives. Miley Cyrus was one of the most visible. The expectation was enormous and unspoken. Give us the stories. Give us the private memories. Give us the version of grief that makes us feel closer to the woman we have lost. She declined. The post she wrote the next morning is short. It has been broken into fragments and circulated as single sentences. Read in full and in sequence, it becomes something rarer. It is a deliberate refusal dressed in the gentlest possible language. She begins by saying the loss is beyond what feels right to share. She names the places where the real moments lived, behind the stage, beneath the glamour, between their hearts. Then she offers the only instruction she believes Dolly would have wanted her to follow. Feel it. Write a song about it. Continue on and be strong. That sentence is not sentiment. It is a working method handed down across 60 years. Dolly Parton met every hard passage the same way. She felt it, she wrote it into a song, and she went back to work. The instruction is the inheritance. Everything else was secondary. Read the post again without the fragments the internet prefers. It contains almost no stories. There are no dressing room memories from the Hannah Montana years. There is no description of the January recording session that had taken place only 7 months earlier. There is no account of final conversations beyond the single careful phrase that one of them had been about music and metamorphosis. Even that detail is offered and then left untouched. The most specific gift Miley Cyrus gives the public is the decision to give them almost nothing. That decision is the opposite of what the moment rewards. When someone you love dies and you yourself are famous, the culture waits with open hands. The more you place in those hands, the kinder the coverage becomes. Vulnerability is praised. Detail is celebrated. The longer the tribute, the more it is shared. She chose the other path. She wrote a text that protects rather than performs. In doing so, she completed the lesson Dolly Parton had been teaching, without ever announcing it as a lesson, for 33 years. Dolly had lived her entire adult life as one of the most recognizable people on the planet. She gave interviews by the thousand. She built a public image so complete that strangers could describe her from memory. And she kept the center of her private world almost entirely sealed. Her marriage to Carl Dean lasted 58 years and remained largely invisible by design. He did not walk red carpets. He did not sit for profiles. He watched her perform once. She offered the world the rhinestones and the songs and the jokes and withheld the part that mattered most. That boundary was not an accident. It was a practiced discipline. Miley Cyrus had watched the discipline up close for her whole life. When her own moment of maximum visibility arrived, she did not invent a new response. She used the one she had been given. The 3 phrases she chose are exact. Behind the stage. Beneath the glamour. Between their hearts. Each one names a layer of the public self and then steps past it. The real relationship, she insists, lived underneath every version the cameras were allowed to see. By naming the layers, she refuses to peel them back. She ends with an instruction that is also a portrait. Feel it. Write a song about it. Continue on and be strong. 9 words that contain a 60-year working method. Dolly Parton met the hardest passages of her life the same way. She felt the weight, she turned it into music, and she returned to the work. The sentence is not comfort. It is continuity. It tells the younger woman how to carry the loss without letting the loss become the only story. 2 sisters posted on the same day. Miley Cyrus offered even less. 3 broken heart emojis. A photograph of Dolly with a horse. The song the 2 of them had made together years earlier playing underneath. No sentences at all. The shared restraint is not coincidence. It is evidence of the same teacher. What the world received that morning was not a window into grief. It was a demonstration of inherited boundaries. In an age that treats every private feeling as potential content, the refusal itself becomes the most eloquent statement available. The promise was made in a Nashville room before the child existed. It was spoken without ceremony and without any mechanism of enforcement. A woman who already carried the weight of her own legend simply said yes. Then she spent the next 33 years proving that the yes had been real. She appeared on a children's television show at 60 and stayed for 4 seasons. She handed her audience a cross rather than collecting a younger one. She sang the girl's songs and invited the girl to sing hers. She kept showing up in the ordinary ways that never became content. And when the end came, she left behind a method rather than a set of stories. Miley Cyrus stood inside the full glare of public expectation and chose the quieter inheritance. She could have filled the post with memories that would have been praised as generous. She could have described the final conversations in ways that would have trended for days. She did none of that. She protected the center. In doing so, she completed the longest lesson Dolly Parton ever taught, that some things remain more valuable when they are not performed. The public will continue to tell its own versions. There will be documentaries and anniversary specials and carefully packaged retrospectives. Some of them will be tender. Some will be clumsy. All of them will reach for the visible surface because the surface is what remains available. The real relationship, the one that lived behind the stage and beneath the glamour and between two hearts, was never offered for examination. That is not a loss. It is the point. Feel it. Write a song about it. Continue on and be strong. The sentence travels now without its original speaker. It does not require explanation. It is practical. It is durable. It is the kind of instruction that can be used on an ordinary Tuesday as easily as on the morning after the world changes. Somewhere a 33-year-old woman is learning how to carry it. She will not do so in public. She does not need to. The work was always meant to happen out of sight. A child was given to a woman who had no children of her own. The woman kept the child in the ways that mattered and released her in the ways that were necessary. When the woman was gone, the child did the one thing that would have made her proudest. She said very little. She kept the rest where it belonged. And then, if the method holds, she will eventually turn the weight into music and keep going. That is the whole story. Not the fame. Not the shared stages. Not even the songs that moved back and forth across 3 decades. The story is the boundary that held. The quiet yes that lasted. The final refusal was also the deepest form of gratitude. Behind the stage. Beneath the glamour. Between their hearts. Some inheritances are only visible in the moment someone chooses not to display them.